You ever hear a sound so cold it cuts through bone? That's how the wind screamed that night, like something alive, clawing to get inside the fuselage. The pilot didn't talk much. Men like him never do when they're being paid in unmarked bills and told not to ask questions. We were flying north, over frozen veins of river and forest that looked more like scars than land. I kept watching the world fade from white to black until the window froze over. Then there was nothing left to see but my own reflection staring back. Eyes that had seen too much and still didn't believe in monsters. They'd reached out to me through channels that didn't exist anymore, military ghosts, private contractors, the kind of men who get paid to do what others pretend doesn't happen. The message was short. Target located. Northern Alberta. Confirm kill. Bonus for proof. No coordinates, just a drop point. They called the target the Wendigo. I thought it was code for a fugitive or an off-the-books experiment gone wrong. But part of me, some old, superstitious part, remembered the stories I'd heard as a kid. About a hunger that walks on two legs, a voice that isn't human but sounds close enough to make you follow it into the dark. The pilot refused to take us all the way. "Fuel can't handle the cold," he muttered, though I saw the sweat freezing in his beard. He set us down on a patch of ice that used to be an airstrip, somewhere near the edge of a ghost town marked Fort Ellsworth on the old maps. I asked when he'd be back. He looked at me once, shook his head, and said, "Not after sundown." Then he was gone, his plane shrinking to a speck against the snowstorm that rolled in behind him like a living wall. Silence came next. Real silence, the kind you don't hear until it's too late. My breath fogged against the black. The air was sharp enough to sting when I inhaled, each exhale rising like a ghost that didn't want to leave. I dragged my pack toward a rusted hangar half buried in drift and ice, hoping for shelter. Every step echoed in the hollow space, and every echo came back wrong, half a beat slower, like something else was walking just behind me. Inside, the smell hit first. Not death exactly, but something chemical. Ozone, burned meat, iron. I swept my flashlight across the walls. The beam caught claw marks, deep grooves cut through metal sheeting, twisted in strange, almost deliberate patterns. It looked like something had been testing its strength, or maybe trying to get out. I crouched beside the marks, ran a gloved hand over the grooves, and the cold metal burned like dry ice. Whatever had done this wasn't an animal. I've seen what bears do to steel. This was different, cleaner, angrier. I set up camp in the corner, just far enough from the main door to see anyone or anything coming. The small stove hissed when it caught flame, filling the hangar with orange flicker. I remember watching that fire like it was the last living thing left in the world. I ate a protein bar that tasted like sawdust and opened the satchel they'd given me. A map, a compact rifle with tungsten rounds, and a handwritten note. One word: eliminate. That's when I started talking to the recorder. It's what I'm doing now. Maybe someone will find these tapes and make sense of what I couldn't. Maybe they'll just burn them. Either way, it's better than silence. Silence eats you faster than hunger out here. Around midnight, the wind shifted. It came through the broken panels like a voice, long and low. I thought it was the storm until I heard my name. Once. Clear as day. No one knew my name out here. Not the pilot, not the people who hired me. I turned off the stove, killed the light, and waited. The temperature dropped fast, the kind of cold that creeps into your lungs and makes you afraid to breathe. The hangar door groaned, metal flexing under pressure. I raised my rifle, finger tight on the trigger. Nothing moved. Just that wind, whispering the same word, again and again. When dawn came, it didn't bring comfort. The light just made everything look deader. I went outside, boots crunching over frost that looked like ash. The forest loomed ahead, black pine trees bowed under weight of snow, the ground littered with bones too clean to be left by wolves. I knelt beside one pile, ran my hand over a femur that still held tooth grooves. They were long, human-like. I pocketed a shard for analysis, though I already knew it wouldn't matter. That afternoon, I found the airstrip's control shack half collapsed under snow. Inside was an old radio, frozen solid. I cracked the casing, managed to spark it up with a battery pack. Static filled the room. Pure, endless static. Then a burst of sound. Not words. A pattern. 3 tones repeating every few seconds, like some automated beacon. But the strange thing was, each time I moved closer to the forest, the signal grew stronger. Whatever it wasn't coming from any tower. It was alive. By the second night, the storm had swallowed the sky. I couldn't tell if it was still snowing, or if the world had just turned white forever. I didn't sleep. Around 2, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The kind of steps made by something that knows you're listening. I killed the fire, crouched near the door with my rifle steady. The sound stopped. A shadow passed across the frost line near the window, tall, too tall, with shoulders that seemed to drag against the roof's edge. I waited for the shape to move, but it didn't. It just stood there, silent, until the wind shifted again and the smell hit me, rot and metal, like blood on copper. I counted the seconds, heart thudding loud enough I thought it might give me away. Then something scraped against the wall, a slow, testing drag, metal on metal. I flicked my flashlight toward the sound. For a split second, the beam caught it. Pale skin stretched too thin, antler-like bone protrusions along its skull, eyes reflecting the light like dull gold coins sunk in water. Then it was gone, vanished into the snow without sound. I fired once anyway. The bullet hit steel and ricocheted, sparking like lightning. When silence fell again, it was worse than before. Morning came gray and hollow. No tracks. No blood. Just wind. But near the hangar's door, something new. A mark in the snow. My own boot print reversed. As if someone had stepped exactly where I had, backward. Tracing my path. I packed my gear faster than I ever had in my life. Whatever this was, it wasn't a hunt. It was a setup. Still, something in me, the soldier, the fool, refused to leave. You don't just walk away from a thing like that. You find it. You make it make sense. That's what I told myself as I shouldered the rifle and followed the tree line east, toward the signal, toward the sound that still echoed faint in the static. The forest swallowed the light by midday. Snow muffled every sound except the crunch of my own boots. Sometimes I thought I saw movement between the trees, shapes darting in my periphery, shadows that melted when I looked straight at them. Once I caught a glint of something metallic wedged in a trunk. An old trail camera, lens cracked, red light blinking weakly. I took the card, pocketed it. Later, I'd see what it recorded. For now, I needed to keep moving. By the time night came again, I'd reached a ridge overlooking a frozen river. Down below, scattered lights flickered among the trees, too steady to be fire, too dim to be electrical. I watched them pulse in rhythm, almost like breathing. The air stank of ozone again. My breath fog-hard and fast. The Geiger counter clipped to my vest began to tick faintly. I found the coordinates carved into the back of that old map they'd given me, burned into the leather, faint but deliberate. North of the airstrip, maybe 12 miles through a maze of pines and frozen creeks. The kind of terrain where sound doesn't travel right, where every echo feels like it belongs to someone else. I'd spent half my life tracking things that didn't want to be found, runaways, deserters, sometimes things worse than men, but this place didn't feel like any hunt I'd ever done. It felt like trespassing. The snow was knee-deep, light falling in slow spirals from a sky that had forgotten the sun. I followed faint impressions in the ice, prints too large for wolf, too heavy for moose, each stride impossibly long. They led nowhere, looping back on themselves like whatever made them didn't know where it wanted to go, or worse did, but wanted me confused. By dusk, I found a clearing surrounded by pines bent under the weight of frost. Perfect line of sight, decent cover. I pitched my tent beside a dead fire ring and lit a small flame in the stove, just enough to keep the air from biting too hard. The forest breathed around me, branches shifting like restless sleepers. Somewhere far off something screamed, a sound halfway between a man's shout and a deer's cry. It rose, broke apart, then came back softer, almost like it was repeating itself. I froze, counting the rhythm. It wasn't an echo. It was mimicking. That night, I wrote a few lines into my field log, mostly to quiet my nerves. Camp established. Temperature dropping. No sign of target. Heard vocalization at 1900 hours. Unconfirmed source. I left out the part where I nearly dropped my rifle when the voice started repeating my name. The next morning brought more footprints, fresh, circling the perimeter of my camp. Bare human feet pressed into the snow like wax molds, but with too many joints, too long a stride. I followed them east until they simply stopped in the middle of the clearing, like the walker had evaporated. No return tracks, no sign of struggle. Just nothing. The second day, I found the first carcass. A deer, or what was left of it, stripped to bone in a way no scavenger would bother with. The ribs had been arranged outward, almost artistic, forming a spiral pattern in the snow. The skull sat in the center, facing upward, antlers glistening with frost. Something about the precision made my stomach tighten. This wasn't feeding. It was ritual. That afternoon a man stumbled into camp, a trapper, rough and old, eyes the color of wood smoke. He said his name was Jules and asked if I had coffee. His breath steamed as he spoke, hands trembling more from fear than cold. I poured him a cup, and for a while we just sat, listening to the stove hum. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally. "Things walk these woods that ain't from any story you heard right. I'm not here for stories." He looked at me over the rim of the tin cup. "Then you'll die with no one to tell yours." He told me about missing sled dogs, about bones found frozen upright in the snow, like something had planted them there. He swore he'd seen lights in the trees, blue and gold, flickering like lanterns. But when he got close, they moved higher, always just out of reach. I asked him if he believed in the Wendigo. His eyes narrowed. "That ain't an animal out there," he said softly. "It's hunger wearing a face." Before I could ask what he meant, he stood up, dumped the last of his coffee into the snow, and walked away without another word. I watched his figure vanish between the trees until it became just another shadow among many. The third night, the storm came. Snow fell sideways, sharp enough to slice skin, wind roaring like the forest itself had lost its mind. I sealed the tent flaps tight, radioed static into the void, and waited. Hours passed in a blur of white noise and heartbeat. Around midnight, something brushed against the tent wall. A slow, deliberate drag, claw on canvas. I froze, every nerve screaming. Then came the breathing. Shallow, raspy, right outside. I switched off my light and reached for the rifle. The air inside the tent felt heavy, too warm, like something living had crawled inside my lungs. The shape outside circled slowly, each step crunching through snow. It stopped near the entrance, and I saw a faint glow, a dull amber reflection seeping through the fabric, moving like eyes. I unzipped the flap just enough to slip the barrel through and clicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the snow and caught it. It stood maybe 8 feet tall, shoulders hunched, skin pale as birch bark stretched too tight over bone. Antler-like protrusions curled from its skull, glistening with frost. Its mouth wasn't open, but I could hear the sound of breathing. Wet, uneven, like air forced through broken glass. When the light hit its eyes, they didn't shine, they absorbed. And, in that instant, I swear I saw recognition. My finger tightened on the trigger, but the rifle jammed with a hollow click. I cursed under my breath, smacked the bolt, tried again. Nothing. The creature tilted its head, like it was studying me. Then it did something worse than any attack. It smiled. Not with its mouth, but with a ripple through its skin, a stretch of expression that didn't belong on a human or animal. The snow whipped harder, and when I blinked, it was gone. I stumbled out into the storm, flashlight cutting erratic arcs through the whiteout. The wind roared so loud I could barely hear myself think. Then I saw them, more tracks. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all around my camp. Human, animal, impossible to separate. Each print led outward in perfect formation, then vanished into untouched snow. I followed one line a few paces before realizing something terrible. They weren't coming toward the camp. They were leaving it. I sprinted back, half expecting the tent to be torn apart. But it stood there untouched, the stove flame still flickering faintly inside. My hands shook as I rechecked the rifle. Chamber clean. Round intact. It should have fired. There was no reason it shouldn't have. I spent the rest of that night awake, sitting against the tent pole, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other, waiting for dawn that refused to come. Hours felt like days. The wind never stopped. At some point, through the white noise of snow, I thought I heard voices again, low murmurs, dozens of them, repeating the same phrase in unison. Could have been the storm. Could have been something else. But they were saying my name. By morning, the sky had cleared, and the world looked brand new. No storm, no footprints, no sign of the thing I'd seen. Just calm, quiet emptiness. Like it had all been erased. I stepped out, scanned the horizon through the scope. Nothing moved. The forest stood still, pretending innocence. I told myself it was exhaustion, that isolation and cold make the mind see patterns in noise. But then I found the camera I'd set up on the ridge, still blinking red. The footage played back smooth until around midnight, then static. Through the distortion, one frame stood clear. A silhouette standing beside my tent, arm reaching down toward the fabric. And next to it, another figure. Smaller, human-shaped, holding something that glinted metal. I froze the frame and leaned closer. The smaller one was wearing snow camo, same pattern issued to private contractors. I recognized the model of the weapon in its hand, a tranquilizer rifle. My throat went dry. That night, staring into the endless snow, I realized I wasn't alone out here, and I wasn't the only one being paid to kill.